Incredible twist. Maid discovers hidden courage, rescues Billionaire from life-threatening waters. Jasmine stood in the opulent foyer of the seaside mansion, dust motes swirling in the warm, golden light filtering through the grand windows. The sweet smell of the ocean clashed with her ever-present anxiety, a reminder of the dreams she was slowly sinking beneath. At 24, she wore a crisp uniform that felt like a shackle around her ambition of becoming a marine biologist. Instead of studying ocean currents and marine life, she scrubbed floors, her grandmother's fading health constantly echoing in her mind. How would she pay for medical bills or the costs of schooling? The weight of it all cast shadows over her heart. As the tide ebbed and flowed, Jasmine tried to remain focused while polishing the exquisite silverware that lined the dining room. But her thoughts were a tempest. Every sparkling piece she touched reminded her of how far she strayed from her aspirations. The waves of doubt crashed against her resolve, making her question her worth and future. Doubt tightened its grip on her throat, gnawing at her dreams. With each passing day, the reality that she might never escape this life darkened like the clouds gathering outside. Suddenly, a thunderous roar filled the air. "Storm warning!" came the frantic shout, jolting her from despair. Waves crashed against the shore with a menacing rhythm. Panic settled in the mansion like an unwelcome guest. The billionaire owner, Richard, had decided to sail out just before the storm, news that sent waves of frantic urgency through the estate. Fear gnawed at her stomach as whispers about his fate spread like wildfire. If something happened to him, the repercussions would sweep their tranquil little town into chaos. Thinking of her grandmother kept her grounded, yet worry twisted her gut. How could she help, yet not be left behind? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. A blaring horn interrupted her frantic thoughts, signaling Richard's yacht was in distress. At that moment, the storm inside her broke free. Steeling herself, adrenaline surged through her body, and before she could ponder the consequences, Jasmine bolted towards the raging sea's edge. The water was cold and treacherous, but there was a fire in her chest lighting her way forward. Would anyone understand her leap of faith? Did they care, or only view her as the maid she was? As she plunged into the turbulent waves, thoughts scattered like driftwood in the storm. The water stung her skin, the salt burning her eyes. Every stroke felt like a battle against the tide. She could save him. Her heart shouted against her doubts. But in that moment of purpose, she began to doubt the strength of her own resolve. What if her kindness was mistaken for foolishness? Would the very man she'd risked everything to save ever truly see her? With every agonizing moment, the reality of their worlds collided, and she swam desperately toward the yacht amidst the swirling chaos. The surge of the waves knocked the wind from Jasmine's lungs. Each clash of water against her body a stark reminder of the treachery she faced. Determination pounded within her as fiercely as the rhythm of her heart. What did she really have to lose, aside from the mundane routine she had been shackled to? Every stroke was a declaration against her fears, a rebellion against the role society had cast her into. She fought her way toward the yacht, the once distant figure of Richard now visible in the chaotic sea. His yacht, tilting perilously, had become a metaphor for their lives, wealth and privilege atop a facade that could easily crumble. With grit and resolve, she pushed through the salt-laden waters, cutting a path toward what seemed an impossible rescue. Was she truly capable of saving him when her own dreams felt so far away? As she drew closer, the panic on Richard's face solidified her conviction. He was not just the billionaire, he embodied everything Jasmine aspired to become, someone who could conquer challenges without hesitating. But would he view her as nothing more than a maid who dared to enter his world? Each wave crashed against her, layering her uncertainty. She was drowning in a tide of self-doubt. Suddenly, she gripped the side of the yacht, her fingers slipping on the slick surface. With a surge of adrenaline, she yelled to Richard, "Grab my hand!" Though her heart raced, her voice carried an unexpected steadiness. She felt a flicker of empowerment. Her pride, entwined with compassion, would not let her falter. Richard's eyes widened. In that moment of fear and disbelief, he hesitated. She could see the flicker of doubt in his expression, the unspoken question, why should he accept help from her? Jasmine's vulnerability was laid bare as she realized he doubted her, yet that doubt only fueled her determination. "I won't let you down," she shouted, pulling herself closer, both physically and emotionally, to someone who had been nothing more than a passing thought on her daily checklist. With a deep breath, Richard reached out, fingers brushing against hers before clasping tightly. As she hoisted him towards the safety of the boat, her heart surged with triumph. An overwhelming warmth surged through her, a recognition of her potential. Perhaps this moment wasn't just a fleeting act of bravery, but the birth of a new Jasmine, stronger and ready to confront her fears. The waves began to recede as adrenaline waned, leaving exhaustion in its wake. They stumbled onto the deck together, breathless and drenched, but alive. Richard's gaze met hers, caught somewhere between disbelief and gratitude. "Why did you come after me?" he asked, faltering as he processed her audacity. "Because someone had to," she replied, the words rolling off her tongue with newfound confidence. It felt like a declaration, not just about them, but about her own identity. The truth was undeniable. She was more than an employee. She was a force of nature, awakening. But as the emotional weight of her actions began to settle, another wave of apprehension crashed over her. What would this act of courage mean for her life aboard the estate? Would Richard see her differently? The gulf between their worlds still loomed large, and the winds of their reality began to blow fiercely. "As soon as we reach shore, we need to talk," Richard said, his voice laced with urgency and something else, admiration? Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. Would this confrontation bring clarity to her vision, or merely deepen her entanglement in a world that had always seemed so far from her aspirations? With their fates intertwined and questions brewing beneath the surface, she braced herself for a confrontation that might redefine them both. As the yacht turned toward safety, the horizon blurred, reflecting the uncertainty of the future they now faced together. The roar of the engine blended with the slap of waves against the hull, forming a chaotic symphony that underscored Jasmine's racing thoughts. She remained on the deck, drenched, but gripping the rail with renewed tenacity. Had she truly crossed a line that separated her from the boundaries of her previous life? As Richard began to process the rescue, his gaze didn't just harbor gratitude. She saw something else, curiosity mingled with intrigue. The yacht surged forward, its path towards safety a promise of discussion, a confrontation that felt both exhilarating and intimidating. Jasmine's heart buzzed with the remnants of adrenaline, but mixed in its wake was a creeping anxiety. What would Richard demand of her? More than anything, she feared the questions swirling in her mind. Was she ready for whatever path this encounter might illuminate? As they reached the dock, the warmth of solid ground greeted them like an anchor to stability. Richard stepped down first, then turned back to her, a thoughtful expression on his face. She was caught off guard by the vulnerability he seemed to radiate. No longer was he the untouchable billionaire. He was immersed in confusion, perhaps even admiration for the depths of her resolve. "Come on," he urged gently, beckoning her to follow. His voice, a mixture of authority and warmth, wrapped around her, and she took a step forward, breathing deeply as she navigated through the tumult of her emotions. Was she prepared to step onto unfamiliar territory, where every inch could be a challenge? Or would she shrink back to the shadows of her past? As they stepped into the lavishly appointed study of his estate, the stark contrast between their worlds enveloped Jasmine like an invisible cloak. Expensive artworks adorned the walls, and the smell of polished wood enveloped her senses, a reminder of how far removed this space felt from her own reality. Yet she was here for a reason, and she refused to let those walls intimidate her. Richard paced slightly, running a hand through his hair, while Jasmine stood at the threshold, carrying the weight of her vulnerability like armor. "Jasmine," he began, his voice low but firm, "what you did out there, it was amazing. I don't think I could have done the same." She blinked, unsure of where his words were leading. "You underestimate yourself," she replied, surprising even herself with the steadiness of her tone. "You've built a life around taking risks, haven't you?" His eyes narrowed slightly, a silent challenge igniting between them. "Not the kind of risks you took. You put yourself in danger for me. Why would you do that?" The question hung in the air, palpable and intense. Her heart thudded as she processed her answer. "Because I realized that my life was stagnant, and I'm tired of being just a maid in my own story. I want more. I deserve to be more." The words fell from her lips like a mantra, solidifying her resolve. Richard shifted, as if her conviction had forced him to reevaluate not only her role in his life, but also how he viewed himself. "So, what's stopping you?" he challenged, a hint of mischief colorizing his tone. The moment crackled with tension, a potential spark igniting the air between them. She saw the doorway to possibilities slowly opening, but she also sensed the fear of failure lurking in the shadows of her mind. What did she truly want? Did she dare to venture where her heart led? The silence grew, thick with unsaid words and unresolved emotions. Could she push past the boundaries of expectation and reforge her existence into something extraordinary? The question loomed, a precipice waiting for her next decisive step. Then Richard took a breath, allowing the weight of their moment to settle. "We both have changes to face, Jasmine, but what if I told you that perhaps we can make those together?" His gaze held hers, the friction of uncertainty and promise intertwining. The world outside buzzed with the hum of ordinary life, entirely removed from the tempest within. Jasmine had navigated the waters of that storm, but now she stood at a critical juncture. Would she navigate the labyrinth of her own aspirations, or allow fear to steer her back to comfortable confinement? Richard's eyes reflected that uncertain future, yet they also held an uncharted map, one she was now more than willing to explore. This was more than a rescue. It was an invitation to reshape their lives, and perhaps even the world, together. Caught in that pivotal moment of potential, Jasmine realized the truth. The time had come to face her deepest fears, or surrender to stagnation. Her heart raced in response to the new possibilities unfolding before her. Would she seize this moment, or would she let it slip away, terrified of what lay beyond? As she stood rooted in decision, the impending future hinted at an undeniable confrontation between identities, and the shadows of their pasts beckoned ominously, waiting to be illuminated. Jasmine's pulse quickened, a silent drum echoing within her as she weighed Richard's proposition. Could they truly navigate this uncharted territory together? The grandiosity of the room mirrored her swirling thoughts. The lavish decor felt almost mocking in the starkness of her internal battle, a reminder of everything she felt unworthy of. Together? The word hung in the air like a fragile glass ball, and she feared the slightest movement might cause it to shatter. What does that even mean? I'm just a maid. The admission slipped out before she could retrieve it, a confession soaked in years of self-doubt. Richard stepped closer, closing the distance between them, and she caught a glimpse of something fierce in his eyes. "No," he insisted quietly, "you're more than that. You've just forgotten how to see it." Her heart raced at the intensity of his conviction, but it was overshadowed by a growing fear of exposure. What if he saw her for who she truly was? Would he find her lacking, just another face in a crowded room? That fear loomed like a specter, whispering doubts that had long lingered in the corners of her mind. "Tell me what to do," she finally blurted, her voice firming as the words struck like a hammer on steel.
I want to redefine who I am. I am tired of holding back. There it was, a spark of her old self, breaking free from the chains of years spent in service without agency. Richard's smile softened, yet it held an edge of challenge. You first need to confront the notions you have about yourself. What does that look like? Jasmine paused, taken aback. Confrontation? She had never envisioned it as an act of self-affirmation. It's about taking control of my life, right? She leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper, emboldened by the prospect. It's going to be terrifying. Good, he responded, his tone steady. A little fear means you're on the brink of something exhilarating. In that moment, the enormity of the change ahead felt refreshing rather than suffocating. If she was going to redefine herself, she needed to unearth parts of her identity long buried beneath the layers of obligation and expectation. Let's start small, she proposed, surprising herself with the clarity of her thought. What about me learning about your business? Expose me to what you do. The bravado that surged within her tasted new and electric. If she could learn, she could contribute, thus breaking the anchor of her previous existence. Richard's brows arched slightly in amusement and respect. That's an ambitious undertaking, but I love the fire in you. Then let's fan those flames,
she stated, her voice gaining volume. Each word was a declaration of intent, a promise to herself. I want to learn how to take calculated risks, create my path, and find ways to make my voice matter. His nod of approval felt like a hallmark of endorsement. I will mentor you, he affirmed, but remember, it won't always be easy. You'll have to fight through discomfort and challenge your perceptions. The thought was daunting. Just as she was ready to dive deeper into the unknown, the shadows of her self-doubt flared ominously. Unpacking years of negativity felt overwhelming, a tidal wave she was unsure she could withstand. What if I fail? The question escaped her lips, a whisper woven with fear. Did you fail out there? He challenged, tilting his head to draw her gaze to his eyes. You conquered that storm. Every inch closer to this moment has been a victory. You've already fought for something bigger than yourself. His words struck a chord deep within her, loosening the grips of trepidation. The tide of resolve swelled within, pushing out the last remnants of her fear. Then let's begin. As Richard laid out plans for her first steps, Jasmine felt the shift within her intensifying. Each word filled her with purpose, tethering her to the burgeoning realization that finding who she was meant facing the shadows head-on. Yet amidst the excitement lay an undercurrent of uncertainty. Would she really be able to rise from the ashes of her previous self? As the conversation unfolded, they unearthed lessons about courage and ambition. Yet a deeper question lingered like a specter between them. How much of her past would she have to confront before she could truly claim her new identity? Would she find her footing, or would the struggles of an old life gnaw at her spirit? The task ahead was daunting, yet Jasmine sensed an undeniable pull toward the light, a chance to emerge as something more. With each word exchanged, she inched closer to that horizon. There remained one truth. This was just the beginning. The time had come for Jasmine to courageously confront not just the emerging opportunities, but the echoes of her fears that hung heavy in the air. As the story of her transformation unfolded, Jasmine sat at the small table in Richard's office, her fingers combing through the stack of papers laid out before her. Each document was filled with jargon and figures that felt alien, yet strangely exhilarating. She listened intently as he explained the intricacies of his business, the passion in his tone igniting a curiosity within her that had lain dormant for far too long. Her mind raced as she tried to absorb every detail. The world of finance and strategy seemed vast, daunting, yet for the first time it felt within reach. She was determined to transform fear into knowledge, to reshape her identity not just from the outside, but in her very essence. "What's your first impression?" Richard asked. His eyes were keen, watching for her reaction. I can see how this could be powerful, Jasmine replied, a hint of confidence creeping into her voice. It's like a puzzle. Each piece has its own place, and understanding how they fit together is essential. Richard smiled, but it was tinged with a knowing challenge. Exactly, but remember, the rules can change without warning. Flexibility is key. You must learn to adapt when the unexpected arises. Something inside her stirred at the thought. Adaptability had never been her strong suit, confined as she was by routine and expectation. The idea of embracing change sent a ripple of both excitement and uncertainty through her. Could she truly shift her mindset, reshape the way she engaged with the world? I wasn't raised to think critically, Jasmine admitted, catching her own vulnerability in the honesty of her statement. I always followed orders. This is new. Richard leaned back in his chair, studying her. And that's perfectly okay. Acknowledging where you come from is the first step in rewriting your story. Every skill can be developed, every trait reshaped, but it takes effort. Are you willing to put in the work? She nodded, her heart pounding with determination. More than anything, I want to thrive, not just survive. Then let's start your first project, he said, his tone shifting to one of direction. Research one key aspect of our business that interests you. Prepare a brief presentation on how you believe it can be improved. This will be your first step towards active contribution. Jasmine felt a blend of anticipation and fear. She had never presented anything outside her previous confines, rarely speaking up even when she had ideas. The thought of public scrutiny sent adrenaline rushing through her veins. Yet the despair of her old self was becoming a distant whisper. "Okay, I'll do it," she affirmed, her voice steadier than she expected. The words empowered her, solidifying the resolve to challenge the whispers of self-doubt hidden within. Over the next few days, Jasmine immersed herself in research, dissecting documents late into the night, absorbing knowledge that widened her perspective. The late hours brought with them a sense of pride, a feeling she'd scarcely recognized before. She didn't just read, she analyzed, questioned, and began to formulate her own opinions. Each evening, as she worked, her old life felt like it was slowly dissolving, a mirage fading into reality. But doubt loomed over her again as the presentation day drew near. What if she faltered? What if her insights were dismissed? Jasmine paced around her small room, inhaling deeply through the fear that threatened to suffocate her zeal. Taking control was no easy task. She felt as though she were standing on the edge of a precipice. On the day, with her notes clutched tightly in her hands, she entered the boardroom. All eyes turned to her, a sea of expectation swirling in the air. The pressure was palpable. As she began, the initial tremor in her voice stoked a fire within. She found herself animatedly discussing the possibilities for improvement, articulating insights that surprised even her. However, just as she gained momentum, a voice interjected from the back, skeptical and seemingly intent on belittling her efforts. "And why should we care what a maid thinks about business?" The question hit her like a visceral blow, echoing the very fears she had fought so hard to cast aside. Suddenly, she felt the walls closing in, a reminder of her past. But amidst the noise of self-doubt, Richard's words rang in her ears. Confrontation was an act of self-affirmation. Would she let the shadows reclaim their hold, or would she prevent that from happening? A new wave of determination surged through her. Taking a breath, Jasmine locked her gaze on the accuser, the boardroom fading around her. "Because I've seen what this business represents from the outside, and I understand how perception shapes reality. If we want to grow, we need to see through the eyes of those who are often overlooked." Suddenly, silence enveloped the room, her words hanging like a crystal chandelier, both delicate and profound. The realization that she claimed her voice, even amidst opposition, was galvanizing. She had just challenged not only the room, but every conflicted part of herself.
As she wrapped up her presentation, Richard smiled, pride strengthening her resolve. The tension in the air began to shift. For the first time, Jasmine sensed that she was reshaping conversation, not just within the boardroom, but within herself. But as applause filled the space, doubt hovered like a cloud. Had she impressed them or merely intrigued them for a fleeting moment? Would this spark ignite into an inferno of growth or flicker out in the face of adversity? The questions lingered, pulling her toward the precipice of her next challenge, where greater tests of courage awaited her. The time had come for Jasmine to confront not only her potential, but also the harsh realities of judgment she had long evaded. How would she respond when faced with criticism again? Would she withstand the flames of doubt or find a way to turn them into fuel? The applause fading into silence left Jasmine teetering on the edge of exhilaration and uncertainty. The quest for validation began to feel like a double-edged sword. She wanted to be seen as competent, yet feared the implications of being judged. As she gathered her notes, Richard approached her with an encouraging smile. "You did well, really," he said, his voice low yet resonant with belief. "This is just the beginning. How did it feel to step out like that?" "I don't know," Jasmine replied, an uneasy smile flickering across her lips. "It was empowering, but there's a nagging voice that keeps asking if it was enough." Richard's expression softened, an understanding glimmering in his eyes. "That voice is something we all deal with, Jasmine. Remember, it often comes from places we've outgrown. Next time, lean on that empowerment more than the doubt." His words lingered in her mind as she left the conference room. Each step echoed with a newfound rhythm, each footfall a reminder that she was not the same person she had been before. She had made a mark, however small it may seem compared to the towering figures around her. But as the days unfolded, that sense of accomplishment felt more like a tether than a launch pad. The tasks that followed her presentation grew increasingly challenging. Jasmine was assigned to collaborate on a marketing campaign, working alongside colleagues who seemed to exude competence seamlessly. They spoke in fluent industry jargon, their confidence cascading like a waterfall, drowning her in doubts she thought she had conquered. In meetings, Jasmine felt like an outsider, her ideas grappling to escape but often falling short of articulation. She would nod, offer tentative suggestions, but the fire ignited in her previous presentation dimmed in the shadows of their expertise. One afternoon, as they pored over analytics, her frustration boiled over. "Why doesn't this resonate with our audience?" she blurted, surprising even herself. Instinctively, she sensed the conversation shifting back to technical metrics, a landscape she felt ill-equipped to navigate. "Because they're not us," one colleague countered dismissively. Jasmine's heart sank, and an uncomfortable silence enveloped the table. The implication cut deeper than any criticism she had faced before. She was out of place in this new world. Stepping out of the meeting, her anxiety coiled tight. The adrenaline that had propelled her earlier began to dissipate, replaced by an oppressive feeling of inadequacy. She leaned against the wall, taking in the chaos around her, a reminder that the corporate battlefield thrived on a cutthroat ethos she was only beginning to understand. Still, Richard's words echoed in her mind. The world wouldn't diminish just because she felt threatened. This was a different type of confrontation. Retrenching into self-doubt wouldn't help. She needed another strategy. Jasmine took a deep breath and pulled out her notebook, determined to silence the negative voices. She remembered how her outside perspective had contributed previously. Was this her strength? As her pen moved across the page, solutions bubbled up, not entirely grounded in the familiar jargon, but rather in clarity and emotional insight. Hours turned into days as Jasmine crafted a proposal that blended market analytics with authentic narratives, something her colleagues seemed to overlook in their data-driven tunnel vision. When she finally presented her ideas in a follow-up meeting, she could feel the change before she even spoke. The once critical atmosphere shifted. She stood firm, weaving personal anecdotes into her insights, tapping into the very essence of relatability that she believed could breathe life into their strategy. But just as she gained momentum, the same skeptical voice from before emerged again. What makes your feelings can effectively relate to numbers. Data drives decisions here. The challenge hung heavy in the air, pulling on her insecurities. But instead of shrinking under the weight,
Jasmine felt her earlier determination spark anew. This was her moment to assert her place, not just as a participant, but as a pivotal contributor. Because people are more than numbers, she said, meeting the challenge head-on. They are stories, connections, emotions that are absent in pure data. If we want this campaign to resonate, we must remember that the numbers represent real lives. The room fell silent, and Jasmine felt a pulse of energy shift once more. The tension bore down, yet an unfamiliar confidence began to fracture the facade of doubt that loomed over her. As she concluded and the discussion opened, Jasmine felt invigorated, but a lingering uncertainty pulled at her. Would they embrace this different approach, or abandon it as they had previously? It was a thin line between victory and rejection, and Jasmine was awake to the reality that this was merely another step in her journey, one that still held perilous challenges ahead. Embracing the fire within was becoming easier, but maintaining it was the true test. With a newfound sense of purpose, she steeled herself for what lay ahead. The path to acceptance was fraught with pushbacks, but they were hers to navigate. What awaited her was a confrontation with arch skepticism, a relationship-building exercise that would test every ounce of resolve she had cultivated. Jasmine realized her journey had transformed into a fight for her voice amidst doubt. But she was done with merely hoping for acceptance. She was ready to claim it. Would she emerge victorious in articulating her vision, or would this wound her progress just as deeply? The critical moment was around the corner, ready to unfurl with stakes that demanded her utmost courage. Jasmine's thoughts raced as she sat back at her desk after the meeting. The echoes of her words still reverberated in her mind. How her plea for an emotional connection had seemingly landed. Yet little seeds of doubt crept in again, whispering that perhaps her approach would be dismissed yet again. The next day brought another team session, and as Jasmine entered the room, she felt the familiar weight of anxiety in her chest. Her colleagues, seated around the conference table, turned their focus towards her. Unfurling her notes, she felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. Should she push the narrative angle again? The facilitator began with an overview of their previous meeting, capturing their attention like a spotlight. "Let's focus on the metrics today," he said, and Jasmine felt her heart sink into her stomach. With each number discussed, she felt further marginalized. It reassured her colleagues while shrouding Jasmine in a familiar veil of inadequacy. When asked for input, she hesitated, her mind racing through the potential pushback she might receive. But Richard's voice echoed once more. "Read charge, Jasmine." Over the next few hours, Jasmine watched as the discussion gravitated toward their results without any mention of the customer stories she believed were vital. As they wrapped up, Jasmine took a breath, interrupting at last. "What if we didn't just analyze numbers, but shared specific customer narratives related to our metrics, to actually humanize our data?" She felt the collective gaze bore into her. "We need hard facts, Jasmine," came the reply, quick and cutting. "Sales data and conversions are concrete. Stories can't turn into successful campaigns." The familiar sting hit her, yet a new resolve formed. "But those stories drive engagement, lead to brand loyalty. Isn't that what we want?" As she spoke, her pulse quickened with the reality of her position. She was being both vulnerable and bold. "What do you intentionally want us to do with that input?" asked another colleague, skepticism dripping from their tone. Jasmine paused before replying. "Can we conduct a quick survey to gauge what drives our current customers? If we understand their emotional engagements, we can tailor our data narratives better." There was silence before a reluctant nod from Richard and another team member. Perhaps the message was finally landing. After the meeting, Richard approached her. "Good job pushing back, Jasmine. You didn't just settle for the status quo. That's growth."
His words filled her with a sense of affirmation, a flicker of belief that each moment counted. Yet, while the acknowledgement felt good, Jasmine's internal conflict persisted. Was pushing back enough to earn her place, or would the tides change again? Days passed, and Jasmine carried the weight of her dual roles, a burgeoning contributor and a relentless self-doubter. On weekends, she began to take courses on storytelling and marketing, eager to sharpen her skills and explore techniques that blended emotional depth with data-driven narratives. Each class unveiled another layer of potential, and soon the fear that her contributions were irrelevant began to recede. She was learning how to weave together personal insights with facts, crafting a tapestry of marketing that spoke to the heart of consumer behavior. Armed with this new knowledge, Jasmine felt a heightened sense of urgency return to the team meetings. But just as she began to feel confident, Richard announced an impending presentation to senior management and assigned her a crucial part of it. Her instincts kicked in. That old voice of doubt resurfaced. Could she really stand up in front of a room full of executives? Night after night, she prepared her segment, layering data over emotional resonance, focusing on real connections the numbers represented. Her pitch was beginning to take shape, but every time she rehearsed in front of a mirror, the reflection didn't convey the strength she envisioned. As the day of the presentation approached, Jasmine's heart raced with trepidation. Would her ideas hold? Would the story she had crafted with newfound insight cut through the skepticism? Standing outside the executive suite, breathless as she waited for her turn, a thought gripped her with new urgency. It was time to confront not just the executives, but her deepest fears about her worth and capability. Would she break the chains of self-doubt or stifle her own progress?
In the throes of expectation, the moment was here. With deep breaths, she stepped toward the doors, determination carving a new path through her anxiety as she lifted her chin and prepared to share her voice with authority. The stakes had never been higher, and all that was left was to see if the courage she had unearthed would carry her through. What awaited her on the other side was the potential to redefine her role in this fast-paced corporate arena. Would the executives see her vision, or would the past hold her back yet again? The air thickened with anticipation. Jasmine barely registered the polished wood of the door before pushing it open. The boardroom loomed in front of her, an expanse of dark suits, scrutinizing eyes, and a vast conference table that felt dauntingly empty, save for the executives waiting at the opposite end. As she crossed the threshold, her heartbeat echoed in her ears, a constant drum reminding her of everything at stake. This was not merely a presentation, it was her chance to assert her belief in the power of storytelling. As she approached the front of the room, her mind raced with flashes of doubt. Each recollection of skepticism from colleagues whispered reminders of her previous struggles. Yet, beneath those doubts resided the hard-earned confidence she had quickly built in recent weeks. With every course she'd taken and every narrative she'd honed, her understanding of emotional connection coalesced into something real, tangible. She had to communicate that. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share our latest insights," she began, her voice steadier than she felt as she summoned the depth of her newfound knowledge. As she spoke, Jasmine visualized her audience not as distant executives, but as individuals capable of empathy and understanding. She launched into her presentation, modulating her voice to draw them into the customer stories, tethering the metrics to real-life consequences. As she narrated situations where emotions had influenced purchasing decisions, she saw nods of acknowledgement ripple through the room. "Here are our numbers, but let's not forget the people behind them," she urged, passionate but measured. "For every transaction, there's a story. Understanding this allows us to engage our customers more deeply."
There was a moment of hesitation among the executives, and Jasmine held her breath, determined to withstand the looming pressure. She could feel the energy shift as she progressed through the presentation. Her convictions seemed to soften their scrutiny. Richard's earlier words of encouragement bubbled in her thoughts. Stay empowered. Jasmine pushed forward, sharing anecdotes about customers whose lives had been impacted by their product. She let the narratives flow, imbuing her analysis with heart without losing sight of the hard data she had collected. The connection was beginning to materialize before her. But then came a counter, abrupt and jarring. While these stories are engaging, how do they translate into immediate business results? Questioned a senior executive, his brow furrowed in skepticism. What's the actionable insight?
Here, the question hung in the air, heavy and challenging. Instinctively, Jasmine felt a flicker of doubt rise again. All the late nights of preparation swirled around her. But buried deep within was another voice, one that had been cultivated over weeks of confronting her insecurities. It was as if a light flicked on. She realized that it was time to turn this challenge into an opportunity. Absolutely, tangible results are critical. The stories we gather provide context to these numbers, giving us a framework to fine-tune our campaigns, she remarked, her voice even clearer. They identify patterns in consumer emotions we can leverage and foster a sense of loyalty that translates to repeated sales. If our customers feel understood and valued, they invest in our brand. There was a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Intrigued expressions replaced some of the earlier skepticism. Jasmine pressed forward, fueled by their uncertain acknowledgement. This was her moment to stake a claim, to reshape perceptions surrounding her contributions and capability. As she concluded, she felt a surge of adrenaline. The room erupted in applause, more vigorous than she expected. Jasmine's chest swelled with a mixture of relief and exhilaration. She was beginning to understand the potency of her voice. Whatever obstacles remained, she was unequivocally committed to the narrative she had initiated. Even though she basked in the applause, a lingering thread of anxiety threaded through her mind. Was this moment a turning point, or was it merely a brief reprieve in a larger battle for acceptance and influence in her team? Richard stood at the front, a proud smile plastered across his face. "You've set the stage for something transformational," he stated, glancing around the room. Jasmine dared to hope that she had not only demonstrated her skills, but also propelled her professional evolution. Still, she understood the journey was far from complete, and new challenges awaited. As they wrapped up the meeting, the lingering question sat heavily in her mind. Would this effort lead to a deeper recognition of her potential in the company, or would she again find herself anchored by doubt? The room faded behind her as she left, determination flickering in her heart. Forces within her were shifting, but the real test lay ahead. With the possibilities laid out before her, Jasmine mustered the courage to imagine her next steps. Was she ready to confront those who might oppose her approach head-on? Or would she allow their skepticism to dim her newfound spark? She could either forge a path forward with unyielding resolve, or let the fears of yesteryears resurrect themselves yet again. The echoes of her growth were about to collide with the reality of her next challenge. She could either yield to uncertainty or embrace the call to lead. Jasmine stepped into the bustling office the next day, her heart buzzing with a mix of exhilaration and apprehension. The adrenaline from her presentation still pulsed through her, but the reality of her next challenge threatened to sink in like the heavy fog that often hung over the city. She had taken a significant step forward, but the thought of navigating the corporate landscape that followed lingered like a shadow. As she settled at her desk, her mind churned with the implications of her performance. Her presentation had been a breakthrough, yet the voice of skepticism echoed. The senior executive's critical eye had been sharp, and the question of how her ideas would translate into measurable results haunted her. Doubt crept in, coaxing her to question if this would be a fleeting victory or a genuine turning point in her career. Before she could spiral, Richard approached her.
"Can we have a quick chat?" he asked, inviting her into a nearby conference room. As they entered, the door clicked shut, sealing them in an enclave of possibility. "Your presentation was excellent," he began, his tone warm but serious. "But we need to capitalize on this momentum. Our quarterly report is due soon. I want you to lead a team to develop a marketing strategy based on the insights you shared." Jasmine's pulse quickened. Leading a team? This was both an honor and a formidable challenge. "Do you think I'm ready?" she ventured, a note of uncertainty creeping into her voice. Richard leaned in slightly, his eyes intense. "You've done the work, Jasmine. You've shown not only the ability to connect the data with real stories, but also to challenge the status quo. But you'll face resistance. There will always be those who prefer the tried-and-true methods." The idea of pushback filled Jasmine with trepidation. Yet the mere acknowledgement from Richard ignited something within her. What if they don't buy into it? Then you demonstrate why they should. Provide them clarity and structure. Show them that storytelling isn't just about emotion, it's about numbers too. You can connect the dots, you just need to be strategic. Her thoughts raced ahead to the looming project. She would have to lead others while managing expectations and navigating skepticism. But the more she considered Richard's words, the less insurmountable the task began to seem. What if she approached it not as a burden, but as an opportunity to showcase her skills further? With a nod, Jasmine replied, "All right, let's do it. I'll create a plan that highlights our data alongside customer narratives. I want to make sure everyone sees the value in this approach." Richard's approval was palpable. "That's the spirit. I trust you, Jasmine. Let's reconvene tomorrow to discuss your strategy." As she returned to her desk, an exhilarating wave washed over her. She envisioned herself standing in front of her new team, not as a subordinate, but a leader poised to make a meaningful impact. The apprehension began to fade, replaced with a burgeoning excitement. Yet, as the day wore on, Jasmine faced new conflicts. Emails flooded in from colleagues, some eager and supportive, others incredulous. A particular message from Mark, known for his incisive critiques, caught her eye.
"Don't see how your approach will drive results. Can you ensure this aligns with our brand strategy?" A flush of irritation rose within her. It felt like a decisive moment, a test of her resolve. Would her instincts to retreat resurface, or could she confront him head-on? As she typed her response, Jasmine hesitated. There was no hiding from this battle. It was time to lean into her narrative. "I appreciate your thoughts, Mark. I believe our brand story can evolve alongside our strategy. The connection between emotional engagement and consumer loyalty can yield our desired results." Hitting send felt liberating, though she knew she'd likely face backlash. But with each confrontation, she discovered a growing strength within herself, a talent for communication that went beyond mere words, one rooted in authentic belief. As the day closed, Jasmine found herself staring out the window, contemplating the horizon. Would this journey fortify her resolve and help her cultivate genuine influence within the team? Or would the skepticism of her colleagues prove insurmountable? As uncertainty loomed, she sensed the winds of change stirring. Determined, she vowed to prepare thoroughly for the challenges ahead. However, lurking beyond the office walls was another realization. Jasmine felt she was standing on the brink not just of a professional evolution, but of a personal one. Her mind raced with the implications. What if leading this project revealed more about herself than she anticipated? And so, with a heart full of anticipation, she prepared for the challenges that swirled around her, knowing the time had come to face her doubts head-on. Yet, beneath her newfound courage lay a flicker of anxiety. How would she uphold her vision when the critics loomed closer? Days turned into weeks as Jasmine plunged into her role with unwavering determination. Leading the marketing strategy project was both exhilarating and daunting, pushing her to step out of her comfort zone in every conceivable way. Each brainstorming meeting was a battleground, a chance for her to assert her place amidst various skeptics and seasoned professionals who initially seemed intimidating. However, she felt an underlying shift within herself. A quiet strength began to bubble to the surface. Richard's mentorship guided her through the complexities of corporate dynamics and advocated for her unique approach. When faced with opposing views, Jasmine harnessed her resilience, armed with deftly woven data-driven narratives that compelled her colleagues to rethink their own entrenched ideas. She embraced discomfort as a stepping stone toward growth rather than a deterrent. Each time she faced doubt, she reminded herself of the stories she had prepared, reinforcing emotional connections that created a tangible impact on consumer loyalty. Gradually, colleagues who had once been adversarial began to show glimmers of appreciation. Mark, in particular, started nodding along more frequently, indicating a growing acceptance of her vision. Jasmine was at her desk one afternoon when Richard knocked and stepped inside. "I've been following your progress," he said, his face breaking into a genuine smile. "I've noticed a remarkable change in how your colleagues
Interact with you. You're inspiring them to think in new directions." Her heart swelled with pride. "Thank you, Richard. It means so much to me that you see it. I feel more empowered every day." "That's because you've embraced vulnerability and made it a strength. But don't forget, leadership isn't just about driving others. It also means being clear about your own goals. How do you envision your role once this project concludes?" The question hit her like a thunderbolt. Jasmine had been so consumed with proving her worth that she hadn't set her sights on where she wanted to go next within the company. "I don't know yet," she confessed, "but I want to explore new opportunities that challenge me. Perhaps even a leadership role beyond this project." Richard's expression turned serious. "This is your moment to communicate that ambition. When the project wraps up, don't hesitate to articulate your aspirations to the team and senior management." With renewed clarity, Jasmine acknowledged her path forward. This project was more than just a task. It had transformed her fundamentally. She wasn't merely a maid who had stumbled into the corporate world of a billionaire. She was shaping the narrative for a brand that could impact countless lives. As the project reached its climax, Jasmine found herself standing in another boardroom, a room filled with executives set to review the marketing strategy. This was it. The culmination of her hard work coalesced into a clear and compelling narrative. "Thank you for being here today," she started, her voice steady and strong. "This strategy represents more than numbers. It encompasses the emotional and human stories that connect us to our audience, a tapestry woven from their experiences." She presented with conviction, detailing not just the data, but the transformative potential of what her team could achieve. As she spoke, she looked around the room, meeting the eyes of those once skeptical. Their expressions no longer reflected doubt. They were engaged and affirming. She was no longer a voice among whispers, but rather a force, challenging the status quo with unwavering resolve. Upon concluding, she felt enveloped in a moment of palpable silence, and as it broke, applause erupted. Richard's pride echoed from across the room, emphasizing the profound depth of her accomplishment. The energy shifted, leaving Jasmine reaffirmed in her belief that emotional engagement was not merely valuable, it was indispensable. After the meeting, she approached Richard, who wore a knowing smile. "You did it. This isn't just about the project anymore. You've positioned yourself as a leader in this organization. How do you feel?" "Empowered," she grinned, feeling lighter than air. "This journey taught me so much, not just about marketing, but about courage and the strength of authenticity. I'm excited about what's next." "Your story is just beginning, Jasmine. Make sure to plot out the chapters you want to write. Your voice deserves to lead." Satisfaction coursed through her veins as she considered the enormity of her transformation. She had not only conquered external barriers, obstacles, but had traversed an internal landscape of fear and doubt, emerging reimagined as an individual capable of assertion and significance. Jasmine left the office that day filled with exhilaration and purpose. The path ahead was laden with potential,
a chance to define her identity well beyond the constraints that once anchored her to a confined room in a lavish mansion. She understood her worth and knew now that anyone could evolve their narrative with clarity and courage. The time had come to share her story, to articulate the dreams that had long simmered. She envisioned standing before future opportunities, no longer restrained by the shadows of her past. With the warmth of sunlight casting a golden glow, she embraced the dawn of a new journey filled with aspirations and achievements waiting to be realized. This was her moment, not just a conclusion, but a gateway into the uncharted realms of possibility that awaited her resolve on the horizon. You need to subscribe now to the channel to witness this incredible journey unfold. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep powerful stories alive. And make sure to comment your reactions and theories about Jasmine's transformative end. Don't forget to share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion.